There's something about the woods at night that changes everything you know about safety. The same trees that look peaceful by day turn into silent watchers after dark, and when the wind dies down, the forest starts to listen. You think you're alone out there, but the woods never sleep. They move, they breathe, and sometimes they answer back. From distant screams that echo through the trees, to campsites that weren't supposed to exist, to something or someone standing just outside your tent. These are 6 true deep woods camping horror stories that will haunt you forever. Because in the wilderness, it's not what you see that keeps you awake, it's what's waiting quietly in the dark. Story 1. The Camper Who Disappeared Between the Trees. When you spend enough nights in the woods, you start to learn the difference between natural sounds and everything else. An owl's call, a twig snapping under a raccoon's foot, wind brushing through dry pine needles. But sometimes the forest makes noises that don't belong to any living thing. In 22, 3 friends Jason, Liam, and Eric decided to go on a week-long camping trip in Oregon's Willamette National Forest. They'd been doing it every summer since high school, pitching tents deep off-trail, hiking during the day, drinking by the fire at night. It was their ritual, their way of escaping the noise of the city. This year, Jason picked the spot. He'd found it online, a hidden site shared on a local camping forum. The post said it was secluded, beautiful, and barely known to the public, exactly what they were looking for. They followed a narrow logging road for almost an hour, until the dirt path vanished into overgrown brush. After that, they hiked another 2 miles on foot. When they finally reached the clearing, it was perfect. Tall trees surrounded them like walls, no signs of other people. A small stream ran nearby. It felt untouched, like the forest had kept this place a secret for them. The first night was peaceful. They built a fire, cooked dinner, and stayed up talking about old stories. The air smelled like smoke and pine. Everything felt right. But sometime after midnight, Liam woke up. At first, he thought it was the sound of the fire crackling outside. Then he realized it was footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the campsite. He sat up, listening. The steps stopped. He waited a full minute before unzipping the tent and peeking out. No one there, just the trees swaying lightly in the wind. When he looked down, he noticed something strange in the dirt. Footprints, bare, deep enough to show the arches. They weren't his, and there were too many to count. In the morning, he told Jason and Eric. Jason laughed. Probably some hiker who passed through. Chill out. But Eric looked uneasy. We're 10 miles off any main trail. Who the hell walks out here barefoot? They shrugged it off, but that night, the footsteps came back. And this time, all 3 of them heard it. Jason grabbed his flashlight and stormed out of the tent, shouting into the dark. Who's out there? The light cut through the trees, but nothing reflected back. No movement, no sound. Then Eric noticed something. Where's Liam? They looked around. His tent was empty. The sleeping bag was half unzipped, still warm. They called his name, but their voices just disappeared into the forest. No echo, no response. Just silence. They searched for hours with flashlights. The forest seemed endless, every direction looking the same. At one point, Jason thought he saw a figure standing between 2 trees tall, motionless, just outside the reach of the light. When he called out, the shape vanished. By sunrise, they hadn't found Liam, not even a footprint. They packed up and hiked back to the road, calling for help as soon as they had service. Search and rescue combed the area for 5 days. No sign of him. No tracks, no torn clothes, no scent trail for the dogs to follow. They found the campsite, and the investigators noticed something strange. The ground around Liam's tent was soft, like it had been recently dug up. When they cleared the dirt, they found roots bent in unnatural directions, as if something had been pulling from below. Months passed. Jason couldn't sleep. He kept replaying that night in his head. The firelight, the whisper of wind through the branches, and those bare footprints circling the camp. He swore he could still hear them, sometimes slow, steady, crunching through leaves behind him when he walked home from work. 6 months later, he got an email from an unknown address. No subject line, just one sentence. "It's still beautiful out here." And attached to it a single photo. The same clearing, same trees, same fire pit. But in the center of the frame, you could see a new tent. Liam's tent, unzipped, empty. And if you looked closely between the trees, you could see a shadow, tall, barefoot, watching. People say the woods remember everything, every campfire, every scream, every lost traveler. They don't take people, they keep them. So if you ever find a campsite online that no one else seems to know about, don't go looking for it. Because someone might already be waiting there, standing quietly in the trees, just to see who shows up next. Story 2. The Whispering Campsite. You can tell a lot about a forest by how quiet it gets. When the animals stop making noise, when even the wind seems to hold its breath, it's not peace. It's warning. In 2019, Heather and her boyfriend Dylan took a weekend trip to go camping in the Smoky Mountains. They weren't experienced hikers. They'd bought most of their gear secondhand the week before, but they wanted the real nature experience. They found a small, secluded site near a lake. No other campers, just endless trees and the low hum of cicadas. The first day was perfect. They swam, cooked over a fire, watched the sun melt behind the tree line. When the last bit of orange faded from the sky, they crawled into their tent and fell asleep to the sound of crickets. But somewhere after midnight, the sounds changed. It started with a faint whisper. At first, Heather thought it was Dylan talking in his sleep, but the words didn't sound like English, more like breathing turned into speech. A rhythm that almost made sense if you listened too long. She nudged Dylan awake. "Do you hear that?" He rubbed his eyes. "Probably wind." Except there was no wind, and the whisper didn't fade. It moved from one side of the tent to the other, like someone was walking around them. Dylan unzipped the tent and shone his flashlight outside. Nothing, just trees, still. Watching. He scanned the ground, no footprints, no movement. But when he turned the light back toward the tent, Heather gasped. Their reflection in the tent's plastic window, it was distorted, stretched, as if someone else's face was pressed against the other side, trying to see in. Dylan yanked the flap shut. They sat there for hours, listening as the whispering grew louder, dozens of voices now. Low, overlapping, just beneath the edge of understanding. At sunrise, the noise stopped. Birds started singing again, and the forest seemed normal. Dylan laughed it off. "We scared ourselves, that's all." Heather wanted to believe him, but she couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen, that faint outline, that almost face against the tent. They decided to pack up early, but when they stepped outside, something was off. Their campsite was surrounded by small rocks, dozens of them arranged in perfect circles around the tent, like a boundary. Each one had been placed carefully, the dirt freshly disturbed. Neither of them had done it. They packed faster. Heather kept glancing toward the trees, feeling that same invisible presence, like someone watching from just beyond the sunlight. As Dylan was taking down the tent, he froze. "Heather, look!" The ground where their fire pit had been, the ashes were gone, completely cleared. In their place, carved into the dirt, were words. "Stay tonight." The letters were shallow, shaky, as if made by trembling hands. They didn't stay. They hiked out as fast as they could, barely talking, hearts pounding the entire way. When they finally reached their car, Heather turned on her phone to check the map. There was no signal, no GPS, no sign they'd ever been near a lake at all. It took them 4 hours to find the main road again. That night, back home, Heather couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard it again, that whispering, soft and patient, as if waiting for her to answer. Around 3 a.m., she got up and went to the bathroom. The window was cracked open slightly. And from outside, through the trees behind the house, she heard it again. "Stay tonight." The next morning, Dylan called. His voice was shaking. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "I checked my phone this morning. I had a video saved I don't remember taking." He sent it to her. It was grainy, dark shot from inside the tent. Heather could hear her own breathing, fast and panicked. Then the camera turned toward the entrance, and through the fabric, she could see the faint shadow of a figure standing outside. Not moving, just listening. Then, barely audible, a whisper close to the microphone. "You heard us." The video ended there. Dylan deleted it immediately. They promised not to talk about it again, not to tell anyone. But 2 weeks later, Heather got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small bag, full of dirt and tiny rocks. And a note, written in her own handwriting. "Stay tonight." There are places in the woods that don't want to be left alone. They notice when you arrive. They whisper when you sleep. And sometimes they follow you home. Story 3. The tent beside the lake. The lake was supposed to be peaceful. Still water, clean air, no noise except for birds and the faint ripple of wind. But in the woods, stillness doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it's the forest holding its breath, waiting. In the summer of 2018, Josh and his girlfriend Emily decided to go camping for the first time as a couple. They drove 6 hours from Portland to a lake called Lake Vinter, a quiet, lesser-known spot hidden deep inside the Cascade Range. There were no official campsites, just a handful of clearings locals used when they wanted to get away from everything. They parked their car by the main road, hiked almost 2 miles through the pines, and found a spot right by the shore. The lake was beautiful, still, glassy, and black as oil. Not a ripple, not a sound. It was exactly what they wanted, or so they thought. That first night, they sat by the fire, telling ghost stories, laughing at how empty the world felt. Around midnight, the fire began to die down, and Emily decided to go to sleep. Josh stayed up a little longer, watching the reflections of the stars ripple across the surface of the lake. That's when he noticed something strange. There was another reflection in the water. Not a tree, not a star, but the faint outline of a tent. He turned to look behind him. Their tent was there, 5 feet away. But in the reflection, there were 2 tents, one beside theirs. He turned again. Nothing there, just the trees and their gear. When he looked back at the water, the second tent was closer, and there was movement inside it. He shook Emily awake. "There's something across the lake," he whispered. She squinted out the tent flap. "I don't see anything." He pointed toward the reflection, But when she looked, there was nothing, just their tent and the trees behind them. "You're seeing things," she said, "half asleep. Come to bed." He tried to laugh it off, but every few minutes, he found himself glancing toward the water again. The reflection was still there. Now, the second tent looked identical to theirs, same size, same shape, even the same angle of the flap. The next morning, Josh woke up to find footprints in the sand, bare footprints, leading from the water to their tent, then stopping abruptly. Emily thought he was joking when he showed her. She snapped a photo on her phone, but when she checked the gallery later, the image was blank, black. They argued about leaving, but decided to stay one more night. They'd come too far to pack up over weird shadows. That night, the lake was even quieter. No bugs, no frogs, just silence. Josh lay awake, listening to Emily breathe beside him, when he heard something, a faint sound of fabric rustling, like someone unzipping a tent. He froze. The sound didn't come from their tent. It came from outside. He reached for the flashlight, unzipped the flap a few inches, and peeked through the gap. Across the clearing, by the edge of the trees, stood another tent. Exactly like theirs. It hadn't been there before. A faint light glowed inside, not firelight, but the cold white of a phone screen. And for a second, he saw a silhouette move behind the fabric, someone sitting perfectly still. Then the light went out. He shook Emily awake again. She saw it too this time. The other tent. Right there. They whispered in panic. Should they call the police? Was someone pranking them? Then they noticed something worse. The sound of breathing, coming from right outside. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Josh grabbed a knife from the gear bag, ready to unzip the tent. But before he could, a voice whispered from the other side of the fabric. "Why did you come back?" They froze. Neither of them had ever been here before. The voice continued soft, trembling, like it was repeating words it had learned by heart. "You left last time. You left me here." Then silence. They waited, barely breathing, until the sound of footsteps faded into the trees. When they finally dared to look outside, the second tent was gone. At dawn, they packed up and left without breakfast. They didn't speak the entire drive home. When they stopped for gas 2 hours later, Emily got out to stretch. When she came back to the car, her face was pale. "Josh," she whispered, "you need to see this." She pointed at the back window. On the dusty glass, someone had written words with their finger. "See you at the lake." That night, Josh checked the photos from the trip. Every picture was normal until the last one. A photo Emily had taken right before they left. It showed their campsite from a distance, trees, tent, lake. But in the background, just by the water's edge, there was another tent. And a figure standing beside it, facing the camera. They say water remembers. Every sound, every movement, every reflection. If you camp by a lake deep enough, you might see what it remembers, not what's really there. And sometimes, the things you see in the water are just waiting for you to look back. Story 4. The Ranger Who Knocked After Midnight. When you're camping far from civilization, there's one sound that always brings comfort, a voice calling from the dark that says, "It's the Ranger." It means help. It means safety. At least, that's what you want to believe. In 2017, Tom, Rachel, and their 2 friends drove up to Wyoming for a long weekend of camping. They picked a remote site in the Shoshone National Forest, a place marked only by a small wooden sign, Campsite 12, Fire Safety Zone. It was isolated, miles from the nearest ranger station. They saw no other cars on the way in. They spent the day setting up tents, fishing, and drinking by the fire. By sunset, they felt completely alone. The world around them was nothing but pine, mist, and the sound of crackling firewood. It was perfect. Until midnight. The first knock came from outside Tom and Rachel's tent. 3 short taps, not loud, not hurried, polite. Tom froze mid-sentence. He thought maybe it was one of their friends, but when he unzipped the tent, no one was there. Then a voice came calm, low, almost friendly. "Evening, folks. Park Ranger. Sorry to bother you." Rachel peeked out beside him. A man stood about 15 feet away, partially hidden by the shadows of the trees. He wore a ranger hat and uniform. No flashlight. "You all camping legally?" the man asked. Tom nodded. "Yeah, Site 12. The man smiled. "That's good. Lot of people sneak in where they don't belong." The tone was friendly enough, but something felt off. His clothes looked right, but they didn't fit right, like the shirt was too small, the badge slightly crooked, the name tag blank. Tom asked, "You out here alone?" The ranger ignored the question. Instead, he tilted his head, like he was listening for something. "You hear that he said?" They didn't. It was dead silent. Then he smiled again. "If you do, don't follow it." Before Tom could reply, the man turned and walked into the woods. No flashlight, no radio static, no sound of boots on dirt. He was just gone. They thought maybe he was real. Maybe he was checking campsites. But when they told their friends in the morning, no one else had seen or heard him. "Probably a ranger on night patrol," one said. But when they looked around, they found something strange. On a tree near the edge of camp, a laminated sheet was nailed to the bark. It looked official Forest Service letterhead and all. But the text was wrong. Half the sentences didn't make sense. Silence patrol required. Do not answer calls from dark. Keep fire low. If ranger arrives, remain inside. At the bottom, where the signature should have been, there was a smudge of dirt shaped like a handprint. That night, they kept the fire burning low. No music, no talking. Around 1 a.m., the knocking came again. 3 short taps. This time, from the other tent where their friends were sleeping. Then the same voice. "Evening, folks. Park Ranger." Tom stepped out with his flashlight, heart pounding. The beam hit the trees. No one there. But in the dirt, he saw boot prints leading away from the tent. Except they didn't look like normal boots. The soles were wrong flat, like they'd been carved out of wood. They decided to leave at dawn, but when the sun came up, their car wouldn't start. The engine wouldn't even turn over. Then they noticed something chilling, tiny scratches along the driver's side door, like someone had dragged their fingers slowly across the paint. Each mark ended in a small black smear, burned wood. Tom hiked to the ranger station 6 miles away. When he got there, a real ranger met him at the door. Gray beard, tired eyes, the kind of man who'd been in the woods too long. Tom told him everything. The man went pale halfway through. "What did he say to you?" the ranger asked. Tom repeated the words. "If you hear it, don't follow it." The ranger's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're lucky he talked to you." Tom frowned. "What do you mean?" The ranger leaned back, as if deciding whether to tell him. "We lost a volunteer out there 10 years ago. Fire took his whole patrol. He used to check this route every night, knock, check, move on. They never found him, just his boots, melted into the dirt." He pointed toward the trees outside. He's still doing his rounds. Son, if you ever hear him again, don't answer." Tom and the others left that morning. They didn't talk for most of the drive. When they finally hit the highway, they all looked back one last time. Through the trees, at the edge of the forest, a man in a ranger hat was standing beside the road, watching their car fade into the distance. He didn't wave. He just lifted his hand slowly, like he was counting them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then he turned and walked back into the woods. They say national forests are full of ghost campers who vanished, rangers who never clocked out. So if you're ever out there after dark and someone knocks on your tent and says they're with the Park Service, don't look, don't answer. Because some rangers don't protect the forest anymore. They protect what's still inside it. Story 5. The fire in the woods that never went out. Some fires die when you smother them. Others keep burning long after the smoke fades. And some were never meant to go out at all. In 2015, Evan, Mason, and Theo went camping in Washington State near an old trail called Black Hollow Ridge. It wasn't on any park map. A local had mentioned it to them in a bait shop, saying it used to be a logging road before the fires. They didn't ask what fires. It took them half a day to reach the ridge. The forest around it looked charred black bark, cracked soil, not a hint of green except for some moss creeping up the trunks. The air smelled faintly of ash, even though the last wildfire had been years ago. They found an open patch near a cluster of fallen logs and set up camp. By nightfall, the wind had died completely, and the sky turned red from the distant sun sinking behind the mountains. Mason tossed a few sticks into the fire pit and joked, "Let's see if this place remembers how to burn." It did. The flames caught instantly, faster than any of them had ever seen, like the wood had been waiting for a spark. The fire burned bright, steady, with a strange bluish tint at the base. It gave off almost no smoke. They cooked dinner, laughed, drank cheap beer. Everything felt normal. Until Theo asked, "Do you hear that?" At first, Evan thought it was wind again. Then he realized it was whispers, hundreds of them, faint but distinct, rising and falling in rhythm with the fire's crackle. When he leaned closer, the sound grew clearer. It wasn't random. The voices were saying names. His name, Mason's, Theo's. He jumped back, startled. "Did you hear that?" Mason laughed it off. "Probably air pockets in the wood." But Theo was staring into the flames, eyes wide, unblinking. "It said my name," he whispered. That's when the fire shifted color from orange to deep, pulsing red. The flames stretched higher, and inside them, for just a second, Evan thought he saw faces. Dozens of faces twisting, screaming, their mouths moving in sync with the whispers. They poured water on the fire. It hissed, dimmed, but didn't go out. Steam rose. Then the flames flared back to life stronger, brighter, as if mocking them. The three men backed away. Evan grabbed a shovel and started piling dirt on top. Still burning. Finally, Mason shouted, "Just leave it. Let's go." They stumbled into their tents, zipped themselves inside, and waited for dawn. But the light never faded from outside. Even through the tent walls, they could see it, a faint red glow pulsing in the dark like a heartbeat. At 3:17 a.m., Evan woke up to heat on his face. The fire was roaring again, taller than before, licking the tops of the blackened trees. He called for the others, but they didn't answer. When he stepped out, their tents were empty. No gear, no footprints. Only the fire and two silhouettes standing inside it. Mason and Theo. Their bodies didn't burn. They just stood there, faces calm, eyes reflecting the blue-red light. Then, in perfect unison, they raised their hands and pointed at him. The whispers grew louder. "Join us." Evan ran, didn't stop for hours. He reached the road by sunrise and flagged down a truck. The driver called the police, who sent a search team up the ridge. They found the campsite, 2 tents, half-melted beer cans, and a fire pit still burning. But when they poured water on it, nothing happened. The soil underneath glowed faintly, as if lit from below. They never found Mason or Theo. A week later, Evan was interviewed by the Forest Service. They didn't believe him, but one of the older rangers pulled him aside afterward. "You said you were on Black Hollow Ridge." Evan nodded. The ranger's face went pale. "That's closed land. There's an old coal vein under it. Fire's been burning down there for decades, invisible most days, but it breathes through cracks." Evan shook his head. "This wasn't underground. I saw it." The ranger sighed. "Yeah, some folks do." Months passed. Evan tried to move on, but every night he dreamed of the fire burning in total silence, faces watching him from the smoke. One evening, he got a call from an unknown number. When he answered, he heard the sound of crackling fire. Then a voice. Theo's. "We're still here." He hung up, but the call came again and again. Every time, he'd hear the same words, a different voice each time. Until one night, he picked up and heard his own voice. "It's still burning." A year later, hikers found new scorch marks on the ridge. The Forest Service posted another warning sign. "Unstable ground. Subsurface fire active. Do not enter." But locals say that on certain nights, you can still see a red glow deep in the trees, and if you walk close enough, you'll find a circle of stones, perfectly blackened, still warm to the touch. Sometimes, they say you can hear laughter around it, the sound of people who should have burned, but never did. Fire doesn't die. It waits. And the forest always remembers who started it. So if you're camping in a place where the air smells faintly of ash and the wood catches too easily, don't build a fire. Because some flames don't need fuel anymore. They just need a name to call out. Story 6. The Cabin That Appeared After Dark. Somewhere deep in the woods, there's a rule every experienced camper knows. If you see a cabin that isn't on the map, you keep walking. You don't take pictures. You don't go inside. You pretend it isn't there. Because sometimes, it's not the forest that's lost. It's you. In 2016, Noah, his sister Kara, and her husband Ben decided to go on a weekend hike in northern Montana. They were the kind of people who lived for the outdoors, handmade packs, compass instead of GPS, the type who said real hikers don't use trails. They left Friday morning and planned to camp for 2 nights near Glacier Park, far from any established sites. The first day was uneventful long hikes, cold streams, clear skies. By sunset, they found a clearing surrounded by pines and pitched their tents. As night fell, a fog rolled in, dense and heavy, blurring the edges of everything. That's when Noah saw it, a faint light flickering through the trees. At first, he thought it was another group of campers, but as he watched, the light didn't move like fire or flashlights. It pulsed slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. He told the others. Ben frowned. There shouldn't be anyone else out here. They decided to check it out. Kara stayed behind. The fog was so thick it swallowed their flashlights within a few feet, but the light ahead stayed steady, always the same distance away, no matter how far they walked. Then, Out of nowhere, they saw it. A small cabin, wooden, old. The windows glowed faintly from inside. It looked newly built, fresh nails, clean planks, but surrounded by trees that must have been untouched for decades. No trail led to it. Ben knocked on the door. No answer. He tried the handle. It turned easily. Inside was normal, almost too normal. A bed, a table, a lamp burning dimly even though there was no cord, no power. The air was warm, but not from fire or heat, just the kind of warmth that feels lived in. There was a single photo on the table. It showed 3 people, a man, a woman, and a child standing in front of the same cabin. The man in the photo looked exactly like Ben. Noah laughed nervously. It's just coincidence. People look alike. But Ben didn't respond. He was staring at the photo, mouth slightly open, like he'd seen a ghost. Then, from outside, Kara screamed. They bolted out. The fog was thicker now, so thick it felt solid. When they reached the clearing, their campsite was gone. No tents, no fire pit, no tracks. Just forest. And, behind them, the cabin's door was wide open. The light inside had gone out. They tried to retrace their steps. The compass spun uselessly. Their GPS showed blank space. Every direction looked the same. By midnight, they gave up and huddled together near the trees. The forest was silent, too silent. Then Noah heard a faint knocking, 3 slow taps, coming from behind them. They turned. The cabin was back, closer this time, the windows glowing again. And, on the porch, a figure was standing. A man, waving. You're safe here, the voice said softly. Come inside. You're freezing. The voice sounded familiar, like Ben. Except Ben was standing right beside them. They ran, didn't stop until the fog thinned and the trees broke into moonlight. By dawn, they stumbled onto a dirt road. A ranger picked them up an hour later. When they described what happened, the ranger's face stayed still. When they mentioned the cabin, he cut them off. Where exactly did you see it? Noah gave the coordinates. The ranger exhaled slowly. That's not possible. He explained that a fire had wiped out that entire section of forest in 1991. No structures had stood there since. They took him back anyway. There was nothing there. No cabin, no clearing, no sign of human life. Just trees. 2 days later, Noah developed the photos from his camera. Most were normal trees, trails, a few campfire shots. But the last 3 were wrong. The first showed the cabin clear, centered, as if taken in daylight. The second showed the same photo on the table, but now, the 3 people inside were looking directly at the camera. And the third, the cabin was empty, but 3 new shadows stood outside the door. Their shadows. Kara refused to talk about the trip after that. Ben got rid of all their camping gear. But Noah couldn't stop thinking about it. He started researching missing hiker reports. There were dozens in that same region. Everyone described a light through the fog. Everyone mentioned a cabin that wasn't there later. A year later, Noah went back alone. He didn't tell anyone. He followed the same trail, the same stretch of forest, the same fog that rolled in right at dusk. And when the light appeared again, he didn't hesitate. He walked toward it. The cabin was waiting. Inside, the lamp was still burning. The same photo sat on the table, but now it showed 4 people. And the 4th was him. When hikers found the site a week later, they said there were no footprints leading in or out, just a single old cabin, half sunk into the soil, with the windows boarded shut from the inside. When authorities returned 2 days later, it was gone again. Just forest, just fog. They say if you ever get lost in the deep woods and you see a light that feels warm and familiar, don't follow it. Because the forest will give you exactly what you're looking for: a place to rest, a roof, a door that opens easily. And once you walk through, it'll remember you too. The woods have always been a place of escape. We go there to disconnect, to find silence, to feel small beneath the stars. But silence has its own sound, and sometimes it listens back. The camper who disappeared between the trees, the voices whispering just beyond the tent, the reflection that moved when no one else did, the ranger who kept knocking after midnight, the fire that refused to die, and the cabin that shouldn't exist. Each story started with a simple trip into nature a few hours away from the world, a few nights under the sky. But the woods don't care how far you travel or why you came. They remember every footprint, every breath, every name you speak too loudly after dark. Out there, you don't find peace. You borrow it. And when you leave, the forest always takes something back. Maybe it's your voice. Maybe it's your reflection. Maybe it's the part of you that still listens for whispers in the wind. Thank you for listening to 6 true deep woods camping horror stories that will haunt you forever. If you ever find yourself camping deep in the wilderness and the night grows too quiet, don't wait for what breaks the silence. Pack your gear, put out the fire, and walk away before the woods remember you too. Because some places out there aren't waiting to be explored, they're waiting to be found again.